Joining me is Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for joining me. What does the Albanese government want the states to do?
Well, it wants them to cap coal prices. It's going to say, as I understand it, the proposal sent to New South Wales and Queensland last night says we will cap gas prices at $13 a gigajoule. That's what the retailers buy it from the wholesalers at. But you have to cap coal prices, which make up a significant component of electricity bills. And you should do that at $125 a tonne. So that's pretty interesting, given that Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers and various ministers have been said, we're going to fix this electricity bill increase issue. And yet they are saying, well, actually, it's the state's problem, that part of the problem. Very Scott Morrison, in fact, isn't it, Andrew, when you think about it? He was always saying, well, that's up to the states. Hasn't taken long for Anthony Albanese to do the same.
Yeah, on the other hand, the states have been cleaning up big time with the boom in prices, so they can afford to take the hit as well, I should imagine. But, all right, the cap for coal is going to be $125 a tonne. What have the prices been on the open market?
Well, that's if the states agree to it, and I can't see that happening this week. But on the open market, it's about $400 a tonne, but there are contracts in place where it's less. And I understand that generally generators have been buying it for between $100 and $200 a tonne. But if you take Eraring, which supplies 20% of the power to New South Wales, they've been paying pretty consistently, I'm told, $200 a tonne. So for coal companies, it's almost half if this cap were to be introduced. So the question is then, are they after compensation? Are the New South Wales government after royalties compensation? Certainly Queensland will be after royalties compensation. And that's where it gets a bit messy for the federal government, who have offered not a dime, as I understand it, as part of this deal at the moment, Andrew, which is an interesting starting negotiating position on it when you're telling the states, effectively telling the states to do something.
I like the fact that the states demanding compensation for the coal companies. What about them? I don't quite get it, but still, here we go. Well, how long do you think before the government's expecting some of this to feed through in lower prices? But when I say lower prices, let me correct myself. Lower than otherwise would be expected, yet still higher than today.
Look, I think that's a really accurate assessment of what's going to happen. And then the political question becomes, well, are they reducing them enough? And that's why I'm still betting on rebates in May for electricity bills, frankly, Andrew. Well, it's too late for the February price rise. We know that's 20%. So it's really about July. And look, they still haven't cemented this deal. But at least in terms of gas prices, you'd expect it to have an effect. The budget forecast, they go up 40%, those bills. The federal government will just introduce that cap. So that will have an effect. Coal, well, I'm not convinced the states will agree to it. And even if they do, is so much of it contracted already, and some of the problems around coal-fired generation generally, the age of the generators, that it doesn't push prices down to the extent that people want. I think we'll be definitely getting electricity bill increases no matter what Anthony Albanese and the states come up with this month.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see how long before they admit that their promise to cut power bills by $125 a household, they'll admit that that was complete fantasyland stuff. The growth figures for the last quarter are out, the last 3 months. Less than what the market expected, just a tad, 0.6% for the quarter. What do you make of that? It's still fairly decent. For the government, it's so far okay.
Well, we've had so many years of hoping for economic growth. Now we're hoping against it, aren't we? Because the more growth you have, it seems the more inflation you have. So I think the government will be seeing the rate rises are working. I might point out in the People's Republic of Victoria, Andrew, they had a terrible figure. They didn't grow at all in Victoria over that September quarter. And you've had 3 rate rises since then. So if anyone's going to start, if any economy is going to start getting depressed, it's Victoria first, which I think is pretty interesting. But generally speaking, it just means we're probably going to see more inflation, more rate rises. until that growth figure declines even further. And I'm pretty sure the December quarter figure it will.
Just quickly, I'm running out of time, but I've got to ask you about this. Liberal MPs in richer seats in New South Wales are being bombarded with calls, I think you were saying earlier today, from some voters complaining that an Extinction Rebellion extremist called Violet Coco, she was punished much too much, they reckon, when she got 15 months jail for a global warming protest which blocked one line of traffic on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It turns out she's the niece of New South Wales Science Minister Alistair Henskins, who stuck to his script today. Here he is.
Well, no one's above the law. No one is above the law. No one is above the law. No one's above the law. No one is above the law. No one's above the law. And people are responsible for their individual actions. We're all responsible for our individual decisions. And everyone is responsible for their own individual actions. We have an independent judiciary. We have an independent judiciary. Well, as I've said, no one is above the law.
Andrew, the Christmas get-together at the Henskins clan, that could be a little awkward this year, but it'd also be awkward, wouldn't it, for Liberal MPs in seats that might vote Teal independent?
Yeah, there's a few strands to this. It is a pretty incredible story, isn't it? Although I don't think he's spoken to his niece in about 10 years, Alistair Henskins, so perhaps not surprising given where both are situated. It does seem harsh to me, 8 months minimum. I mean, maybe a month or two jail. She certainly created a lot of disruption for a lot of people unnecessarily with this protest. I'm sure a lot of your viewers would say, yes, jailer. I'm not sure for 8 months minimum, though, because child molesters at times don't even get jailed, Andrew. So I think that you can see why there is something of a backlash in those Teal independent type of tax seats on the Liberals. But what a twist. And, Alistair Henskins is a barrister. He's pretty articulate, but that's just one of those classic situations of the spin doctors just giving him 3 or 4 lines and just say, parrot them. Bit disappointing, really. I'd like to know what Alistair Henskins really thinks about his niece getting locked up for this offence.
It'd be a very interesting chat. But I tend to agree with you, 8 months minimum, 15 months head sentence. That does seem rather extreme. Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for your time.